I still remember the exact moment I realized I had become the other man in someone else's marriage. It happened on a Sunday afternoon at Northbrook Court Mall, watching Jessica, the woman I had fallen for over the past 6 months, holding hands with her husband, while their young son skipped between them. My stomach dropped as the perfect little family laughed together, completely unaware of my presence. The guilt and shame that washed over me in that moment changed everything I thought I knew about our relationship and about myself. Before I tell you what happened next, and how I found the courage to walk away, drop a comment, letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you believe doing the right thing matters even when it breaks your heart. And subscribe if you want more stories about the difficult choices that ultimately shape who we become. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Gale, I am 35 years old, and I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in Chicago. Before meeting Jessica, I had been single for almost 2 years following the end of a 5-year relationship with my college sweetheart. That breakup had been painful but necessary. We had simply grown in different directions, and eventually the love that had sustained us through our early 20s faded into something more like friendship. After taking some time to heal, I decided I was ready to meet someone new. Dating apps felt impersonal, so I focused on expanding my professional network instead, hoping to meet someone organically. That strategy paid off when I attended an urban development conference in downtown Chicago last spring. Jessica was one of the speakers, a talented architect presenting innovative designs for sustainable urban housing. She commanded the room with her intelligence and confidence, and I found myself captivated not just by her ideas but by her presence. She had this way of speaking that made complex concepts accessible without talking down to her audience. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional updo, but a few strands had escaped, framing her face in a way that somehow made her seem both polished and approachable. After her presentation, I worked up the courage to introduce myself. We ended up talking for nearly an hour about the intersection of engineering and architecture, the challenges of urban renewal, and our shared passion for designs that prioritized both aesthetics and functionality. When I suggested continuing our conversation over coffee, she hesitated briefly before agreeing. During that first coffee meeting, Jessica mentioned she was in the process of divorcing her husband. They had been separated for several months, she explained, and were just waiting for the paperwork to be finalized. It is complicated because we have a son, she told me, stirring her latte absently. We are trying to keep things civil for his sake. I appreciated her honesty and respected the complexity of her situation. Having watched friends navigate difficult divorces, I knew these things rarely proceeded smoothly or quickly. When she suggested meeting again to continue our professional discussion, I agreed without hesitation, but promised myself to proceed cautiously given her circumstances. Over the next few weeks, our relationship evolved gradually from professional contacts to friends to something more intimate. Jessica was careful to frame our early meetings as professional networking, but the chemistry between us was undeniable. We found ourselves lingering longer over coffee, sharing personal stories, and eventually exchanging texts that had nothing to do with work. One evening, after a particularly long dinner discussion about our career aspirations, Jessica kissed me in the parking lot of the restaurant. When she pulled back, she looked both thrilled and terrified. "I did not plan for this," she whispered, "but I have not felt this way in a very long time." I still remember the conflicting emotions that swept through me in that moment. Excitement, certainly, but also concern about the timing. Was she really ready for a new relationship while still legally married? When I expressed these doubts, she assured me that her marriage had been over emotionally for years. "The paperwork is just formality at this point," she explained. "We are only living under the same roof for our son until the custody arrangement is finalized." I chose to believe her. Perhaps because I wanted to, or perhaps because she seemed so genuinely unhappy when discussing her marriage. In retrospect, I missed or ignored several warning signs that should have alerted me to the truth. Jessica and I always met at odd hours, early mornings before work lunch breaks or late evenings that never extended past 8:30 p.m. She explained these limitations as necessary accommodations for her parenting schedule. Her ex-husband, she claimed, had their son on alternate weekends, which is why she was only available on certain Saturdays or Sundays. She never invited me to her home, explaining that she and her husband were still sharing the house until their divorce was finalized. She was concerned about confusing their son or creating unnecessary tension. This seemed reasonable if inconvenient. As weeks turned into months, I found myself increasingly invested in our relationship. Jessica was intelligent, passionate, and seemed to genuinely care about me. We shared similar values, enjoyed the same books and films, and could talk for hours without running out of conversation. I began to imagine a future with her. Once her divorce was finalized, perhaps even becoming a stepfather to her son, whom she spoke about with such obvious love. Despite occasional doubts and the unorthodox nature of our relationship, I chose to trust Jessica. The connection between us felt too special, too meaningful to abandon because of complicated circumstances. I told myself that good things sometimes come in messy packages and that patience would eventually be rewarded. Looking back now, I realize how willing I was to believe what I wanted to hear rather than paying attention to what was right in front of me. 6 months into our relationship, I began feeling increasingly frustrated by the seemingly endless divorce process Jessica described. Each time I asked about progress, she would sigh and explain some new complication, her husband disagreeing about asset division issues, with custody arrangements, problems with lawyers or paperwork. Divorce is never simple when children are involved, she would say. You just have to be patient. I was trying to be patient, but certain patterns were becoming harder to ignore. Jessica never received phone calls when we were together, always keeping her phone on silent or vibration mode. She would check it frequently, though often excusing herself to respond to texts. I rationalized this as communication about her son, but a part of me wondered why these messages always seemed to require privacy. She never posted anything about our relationship on social media, though she remained active on Instagram and Facebook. When I once suggested taking a selfie together at a restaurant, she quickly objected, saying she did not want to complicate her divorce proceedings with evidence of a new relationship. Perhaps most tellingly, after 6 months of dating, I had not met a single person from Jessica's life. Not a friend, not a coworker, not a family member. When I pointed this out, she promised to introduce me to her sister the following month. My sister is the only one who knows I am seeing someone, she admitted. Everyone else would just complicate things with opinions and judgments while I am trying to finalize the divorce. I began asking more pointed questions about her husband and their relationship. Why had they separated? How did they manage co-parenting while living in the same house? What was taking so long with the legal proceedings? Jessica painted a picture of a controlling, difficult man who was dragging out the divorce to punish her for leaving. She described arguments over their son's education disputes about schedules and passive-aggressive behaviors that made her home life miserable. I just want it to be over, she would say often, with tears in her eyes. I want to start fresh with you without all this baggage. Her apparent distress made me feel protective and patient. Still, after 6 months of secretive dating, I suggested that perhaps I could help her find a better divorce lawyer. My firm worked with several excellent family law attorneys who might be able to expedite the process. It is not that simple, Jessica insisted. There are complications I have not told you about. Trust me, I am handling it the best way possible. Her resistance to practical help planted the first serious seed of doubt in my mind. If she truly wanted to expedite her divorce, why refuse assistance, if the situation was? As she described, why the secrecy about accepting help? One evening, while Jessica was in the bathroom at my apartment, a notification popped up on her phone which she had left on the coffee table. I did not intend to snoop, but the name Michael was visible in the preview, along with the words "Home by 9." I looked away quickly, but the seed of doubt sprouted into something larger. Later that night, after Jessica left, I did something I had resisted doing for months. I searched for her on Facebook. Her profile was not difficult to find, and what I saw made my heart sink. Her relationship status read "Married to Michael Thornton," and her profile picture, updated just 2 weeks earlier, showed her smiling with a handsome man and a young boy at what appeared to be a family vacation. There were no indications of separation, no hints of marital discord. Comments on recent photos included friends saying things like, "You guys are such a perfect family," and relationship goals. Jessica had responded to these comments with heart emojis and thankful replies. I felt physically ill. 6 months of my life had been built on what appeared to be a complete fabrication. Still, I told myself there might be an explanation. Perhaps she kept up appearances online for the sake of family or professional connections. Perhaps the happy photos masked a private agreement to separate. I needed proof one way or another before confronting her with my suspicions. The moment of truth came unexpectedly the following Sunday. Jessica had told me she would be meeting with her lawyer to discuss a breakthrough in the divorce proceedings. She seemed excited, saying she might finally have good news to share about moving forward with our relationship. I spent the morning catching up on work, then decided to head to Northbrook Court Mall to look for a new pair of running shoes. As I walked past the food court around 2 p.m., I froze in my tracks. There, sitting at a table with ice cream cones, were Jessica, a man I recognized from her Facebook photos as Michael, and their son, who appeared to be about 5 years old. They looked nothing like a couple on the brink of divorce. Jessica was laughing at something Michael said, her hand resting casually on his arm. Their son was making a mess with his ice cream, and both parents were taking turns wiping his face, sharing amused glances at his antics. They looked like what they were, a happy, intact family enjoying a weekend outing. I ducked behind a pillar, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain people could hear it. For several minutes, I watched them from a distance, trying to reconcile the scene before me with the narrative Jessica had constructed over the past 6 months. As they finished their ice cream and stood to leave, Michael casually draped his arm around Jessica's shoulders and kissed her temple. She leaned into him naturally, the gesture of a woman comfortable and content in her marriage. Their son grabbed both their hands, and they swung him playfully between them as they walked toward the mall exit. I remained frozen in place long after they disappeared from view. The weight of what I had witnessed settled over me like a physical burden. I was not just dating a woman in the complicated process of divorce. I was actively participating in the betrayal of a seemingly functional marriage and family. That night I barely slept. Questions and realizations tumbled through my mind in an endless, torturous cycle. Had any of what Jessica told me been true? Was her marriage truly unhappy, despite appearances? How could she maintain such an elaborate deception for so long? And perhaps most painfully, what kind of person had I become by being part of this deception, even unwittingly? By morning I knew I needed to confront Jessica directly. I texted her asking to meet at our usual coffee shop that afternoon. She replied quickly, suggesting 1 p.m. would work best for her. I wondered bitterly if that time slot fit neatly between her family obligations. When she arrived at the coffee shop, Jessica looked as beautiful and put together as always. She greeted me with a warm smile and a brief kiss before settling into the chair across from me. "I have some good news about the divorce." She began reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled my hand back. "How was your meeting with the lawyer yesterday?" Her smile remained fixed in place. "Productive. He thinks we might be able to finalize everything within the next month or so." "That is interesting," I said quietly. "Especially since you were not with a lawyer yesterday. You were at Northbrook Court with Michael and your son, eating ice cream and looking very much like a happy family." The color drained from Jessica's face. For a moment she seemed unable to speak, her mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. Then, as if a switch had flipped, tears welled in her eyes. "Gale, I can explain," she whispered, reaching for my hand again. I kept my hands firmly in my lap. "Please do. Explain how you have been lying to me for 6 months. Explain how your supposedly failing marriage looks remarkably intact. Explain why you created this elaborate fiction rather than just telling me the truth." Jessica's tears fell freely now. "It is not what you think," she insisted. "My marriage. It is complicated." "Complicated is not the same as ending," I pointed out. "Are you even getting divorced?" After a long pause, she shook her head. "No," she admitted in a barely audible voice. "But that does not mean I do not have feelings for you. What we have is real, Gale." The confirmation, even though I had already known the truth, still felt like a physical blow. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why lie? Why risk your marriage, your family?" Jessica wiped at her tears, seeming to gather herself. "I love Michael. I do. We have been together since college, have built a life together. But sometimes, I feel like I am just Michael's wife, just Noah's mother. I lost myself somewhere along the way." She looked directly at me now. "With you, I remembered who I am as a person, not just as a wife and mother. You saw me, the real me." "The real you," I echoed incredulously. "I have no idea who the real you is, Jessica. Everything you told me about your life was a lie." "Not everything," she insisted. "Not my feelings for you, not the connection we have. A connection built on deception." She reached across the table again this time, successfully capturing my hand before I could pull away. "We can figure this out. I still want to see you. We can be more careful. No one needs to get hurt." I stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. The woman I had fallen for did not exist. In her place was someone willing to betray her husband, lie to her lover, and risk her family's stability for what? Excitement, validation. A break from routine. "What about Michael?" I asked. "Is he a bad husband? Does he mistreat you?" Jessica shook her head slowly. "No. He is a good man. A good father. He works hard for our family. And he has no idea about us." "None," she confirmed. In that moment I thought about Michael, a man I had never met but who had unwittingly become connected to me through Jessica's deception. I imagined him going about his life, trusting his wife, loving his family, completely unaware of the betrayal happening right under his nose. I thought about their son, whose stable home could be shattered if the truth came to light. Then I remembered my last serious relationship, how devastating it had been to discover my girlfriend had cheated. The weeks of questioning my worth, my judgment, my entire understanding of our relationship. I would not wish that pain on anyone, certainly not on someone who, by Jessica's own admission, had done nothing to deserve it. "I can make this work," Jessica was saying, her voice taking on an urgent quality. "We can still see each other. I just need to be more careful about my schedule, my excuses. Michael works late on Thursdays. We could have that night regularly. And some lunch breaks. It would not be ideal, but we could make it work." I looked at her beautiful face, now marked with desperation and tears, and felt a profound sadness replace my anger. The woman I had thought I was falling in love with was offering me a life of secrets, lies, and stolen moments. She was asking me to knowingly participate in the betrayal of her family. With perfect clarity, I realized what I needed to do. "No," I said, standing up from the table. My voice was calm, steadier than I expected it to be. "This ends now." Jessica's expression shifted from hopeful to panicked. "Please, Gale, do not do this. What we have is special. I know it is complicated, but we can figure it out." "There is nothing to figure out," I replied. "I will not be the man who knowingly helps destroy a marriage or takes a father away from his child." "But I love you," she whispered. The words should have moved me. For months I had waited to hear them. Now they just sounded hollow. "You love the escape I represent," I corrected gently. "And maybe you do have genuine feelings for me. But love should not require this much deception. It should not hurt innocent people. So you are just going to walk away?" After everything we have shared, I nodded. "I have to. Not just for Michael and your son, but for myself. I cannot be the person I want to be and continue this relationship." Jessica began to cry again, no longer trying to hide her distress. Other customers in the coffee shop glanced our way, then quickly averted their eyes from the private drama unfolding. "What if I leave him?" she asked desperately. "What if I tell Michael the truth, file for divorce, for real this time?" The question gave me pause, but only briefly. "Would that be because you truly want to end your marriage or just to keep me? And what kind of relationship would we have built on the ashes of the family you destroyed to be with me?" She had no answer to that. I placed enough money on the table to cover both our untouched coffees. "Goodbye, Jessica. I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for, but I cannot be part of this anymore." Without waiting for her response, I walked out of the coffee shop and into the crisp autumn air. As I drove home, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for the relationship I had thought was real, anger at Jessica's deception, relief at having made the right decision, and a strange sense of peace that came with honoring my own values. That evening I blocked Jessica's number, deleted all our text exchanges, and removed the photos of us I had kept on my phone. I knew the coming days and weeks would be difficult. Despite everything, I had genuine feelings for her, and extracting her from my life would be painful. As expected, Jessica tried to reach me through other means. She sent emails to my work account, left messages with colleagues, and even came by my apartment once, though I did not answer the door. In her messages, she alternated between apologies, declarations of love, and promises to leave her husband if I would just talk to her again. I maintained my silence. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew any further communication would only prolong the inevitable and possibly weaken my resolve. When she finally sent an email asking if I planned to tell Michael about our relationship, I broke my silence long enough to respond with a simple, "No. That is not my place. I suggest you focus on your marriage and family." Walking away from Jessica was not an act of nobility or heroism. It was simply the only choice that allowed me to maintain my self-respect. I had unknowingly participated in something I considered wrong. Once I knew the truth, continuing would have been a deliberate choice to do harm. In the weeks that followed, I thought often about contacting Michael about whether he deserved to know the truth about his wife. Ultimately, I decided that was not my story to tell. Revealing the affair would certainly end their marriage, hurting their son in the process. And while Michael might have a right to the truth, I was not the person who should deliver it. That responsibility belonged to Jessica alone. The months following my decision to walk away were not easy. I missed Jessica, or at least the version of her I had believed in. I questioned my choice on lonely nights, wondering if I should have fought for her, if there could have been a way to make things work without causing so much collateral damage. To help process these feelings, I began seeing a therapist. Dr. Harris helped me understand that my attraction to Jessica had been genuine, but that continuing the relationship would have compromised my core values. He also helped me recognize the red flags I had ignored throughout our relationship. The secrecy, the inconsistencies in her stories, her unwillingness to integrate me into any other aspect of her life. Often when we overlook these warning signs, Dr. Harris explained during one session, it is because we are getting something we need from the relationship, even if the relationship itself is unhealthy. That insight forced me to examine what I had been seeking in my connection with Jessica. Beyond the obvious physical attraction and intellectual compatibility, I realized I had enjoyed feeling special, chosen over her husband, even if I had not known that was the dynamic at play. There was something intoxicating about being the one she risked everything to see, even for brief stolen moments. Recognizing that uncomfortable truth about myself was crucial to my healing process. It helped me understand that walking away had not just been about moral principles, but about choosing a healthier path for myself, one that did not feed my ego at the expense of my integrity. About 6 months after our final conversation at the coffee shop, a former colleague asked for my advice. He had begun seeing a woman who was married but planning to leave her husband. The parallels to my situation with Jessica were striking. She says they are basically separated, just living together until she can afford to move out, he explained. But something feels off. We never go to her place. I have never met any of her friends, and she only takes my calls during work hours. I shared my experience with Jessica, omitting specific details but emphasizing the red flags I had missed and the painful awakening that followed. By the end of our conversation, he had resolved to have a frank discussion with the woman about her actual marital status. "Thanks for being honest," he told me. "I think I already knew something was wrong, but I needed to hear it from someone who had been there." Helping him avoid the same pitfall I had fallen into felt like turning my mistake into something useful, a small redemption of sorts. Nearly a year after discovering the truth about Jessica, I attended a professional conference where I knew she might be present. I considered skipping it, but decided that avoiding career opportunities because of our past was giving her too much power over my life. As I had feared and expected, we did cross paths. Jessica looked startled to see me then, quickly composed herself. She was not wearing her wedding ring, I noticed. "Gale," she said, softly approaching me during a coffee break. "I have thought about you so much." "Jessica," I acknowledged with a polite nod. "How are you?" I am. "Okay," she replied. "Michael and I separated 6 months ago. For real this time." A sad smile crossed her face. "You were right to walk away. What I was doing was wrong to everyone involved. It took losing you to realize that." I did not ask for details about her separation, whether it was related to our affair or if she had eventually confessed to Michael. It no longer felt like my business. Instead, I simply wished her well. "I hope you find what you are looking for," I said, echoing my words from our last meeting, but this time with genuine compassion rather than disappointment. As I walked away, I felt the final weight of our relationship lift from my shoulders. I had made the right choice, not just for Michael and his son, but for myself and ultimately for Jessica too. Sometimes walking away is not about losing someone you love. It is about choosing to become someone you can respect. What difficult choice have you made that ultimately led to becoming a better version of yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more authentic stories about moral crossroads. And if you know someone struggling with a difficult choice, share this video with them. Thank you for listening, and remember that our most challenging decisions often lead to our greatest growth.